Hey, this is Ish, and today I want to talk to you about the Big Five personality test. And towards the end of this talk, I'll be going over my results so you can see what I got. So the Big Five personality test was created in around the 80s by different psychologists, and essentially what they did was take a bunch of different traits, and they used different methods such as factor analysis to whittle down all these different traits into smaller clusters. And they narrowed it down to five major categories, which are the Big Five. And these Big Five traits are number one, openness, number two, conscientiousness, number three, extroversion, number four, agreeableness, and the last is neuroticism. And this Big Five personality test is also called OCEAN, because that's the acronym for it. And the acronym of OCEAN is just another really easy way to memorize the Big Five personality types. And what makes the Big Five personality type test a bit different from the MBTI or Myers-Briggs personality is that the Big Five uses a spectrum compared to the Myers-Briggs, which uses more of a binary system. And of course, if you go on websites like 16 Personalities, you might take a test and get like 40% introversion and 60% extroversion. But in reality, if you look at the official Myers-Briggs personality type test, they rank how you are and your traits in a binary system. So you're either this or that. And that helps in that system to narrow you down. So what you'll notice when you look into this type of system is that someone who scores, let's just say 25 in the 25 percentile in agreeableness will look a lot different from someone who scores in the 99th percentile. So when you combine these different percentages in each category, you'll have a more complex understanding of a person, and you can see how these certain factors combine with each other. So if you have someone who's, let's just say, 25 percentile in agreeableness and 90 percentile in neuroticism, they look a lot different from someone who is 25% in agreeableness and let's say 40% in neuroticism. And all these different categories combined together makes for a more complex understanding. And they have done some studies, and they've found out that when you take this test in the right way, that your results will remain somewhat constant and stable after the next couple of years. So these traits tend to be a bit innate, but at the same time, different lifestyle choices and different factors will actually change your results. So that's pretty common to expect. So going into these factors a bit more, so let's just take openness as the first example. So that's the first letter. So openness is just being open to new ideas and different possibilities. So someone who is very high in openness when they take the test, these are people that are very creative. They like to try new things, and they really deal with the realm of abstract possibilities. On the flip side, someone who has low openness prefers routines because they don't want to step outside the box. They tend to be okay and actually enjoy their routines and doing the same things over and over. They are a bit more resistant to change, and they don't like abstract concepts. So they like things that are pretty much here and now and not like theoretical. And the next letter is conscientiousness. So this is basically an organization type of trait. So someone who is very high in conscientiousness likes to prepare, they like to be very detail oriented, and the main thing is organization. So they always have a plan for everything, they have to-do lists. And someone who's low in conscientiousness really dislikes structure, dislikes planning. They're more go with the flow kind of nature. They tend to procrastinate a lot, and they're okay with mess. And this is somewhat similar to the perceiving and judging type letters in the Myers-Briggs, where someone who has a P at the end, like an INFP, tends to be a bit more lower in conscientiousness, while someone who's a bit higher, like such as a J type, will be more organized and more into planning. So that's one interesting commonality I've noticed. Now the next letter is E, and that's extroversion. And it's like a spectrum, like I mentioned. So someone who's very high in extroversion likes to initiate conversations, and they get energized from the different social interactions that they get. They also enjoy larger social circles. And on the flip side, we'll have someone who is lower in extroversion. So this is an introvert, right? And this is someone who prefers solitude. They tend to think before speaking, and they like closer relationships, like more of a one-on-one connection. Now the next category is agreeableness. So this is just being harmonious with other people. So someone who's very high in agreeableness will be very caring, they'll be very empathetic. They'll also be very trustworthy off the bat. So they'll tend to trust people first and then come to their own conclusions, rather than someone who's lower in agreeableness, who they tend to be a bit more suspicious at first, and then they can kind of let them in. And with that comes being very stubborn, being rude, a bit untrusting towards other people, and a bit aggressive. So those are the differences between agreeableness, whether you have really high agreeableness and low agreeableness. And then lastly, you have neuroticism. So this is basically your emotional stability. So if you're very high in neuroticism, you tend to be very emotionally unstable. So you get stressed out very easily, tend to be a bit more moody. You get very anxious or stressed out pretty fast, and tend to worry about different things. And on the flip side, if you are lower in neuroticism, you tend to be a bit more stable emotionally, a bit more resilient. You can come back from hardships and setbacks at a faster rate. You're a bit more chill, relaxed, and go with the flow. And that's something that comes with lower neuroticism. And again, like I mentioned earlier, like lifestyle choices also has to combine with this, contribute to this, because over the years, I've become a lot less neurotic due to my meditation practice. So I'm sure if I took the test, and I haven't, but if I took it like a couple of years ago, I would have been very high neuroticism. But now if I, were to take it very recently, I'd probably be like a lot lower at a lower level. Because right now I don't feel, emotionally unstable or stressed out or anxious like at all. So that's something that like your lifestyle choices actually does have a big influence on. And you'll actually notice that this is very similar to the Myers-Briggs, where they have turbulent and assertive types. And this is very similar in that aspect. Now, a quick disclaimer before I go into my results is that one thing I don't like about this test is that every category of the big five comprises of two components. So for example, openness is made up of just being open in general and also intellect. Then the conscientiousness is made up of industriousness and orderliness. Extroversion is made up of enthusiasm and assertiveness. And then agreeableness is made up of compassion and politeness. And then lastly, neuroticism is made up of withdrawal and volatility. So these traits are made up of two smaller components, respectively. And what I don't particularly like about this type of approach is that if you score really high in one component but very low in another component, that actually throws off your entire balance for that one category. So for example, if you're very high in openness but very low in intellect, that actually might mark you very low in openness. But in reality, you could actually be overall very open. But because you got that very low score in intellect, that'll completely throw off your results. So that's just something to keep in mind and take with a grain of salt. And when I actually go over my results, I'll actually be pointing out different ways where it's a bit not accurate, but then I'll show you different ways where it is very accurate. So going over the first category, and that's openness, and this is openness to experiences. This is what I was saying earlier, where I have a very low openness to experience. I got like marked as like a 13th percentile, but this is actually very false, because if you look at it, it says things like people who are low in this tend not to read. They don't like reading books. They don't like engaging different ideas. And they also don't like engaging in prolonged abstract thinking or considering philosophical issues. And I think that's complete crap, because if you know anything about me, I've actually written books, and I read a lot of books. I read a lot more books than I've written. And I'm also a big thinker. I think of a lot of different ideas and concepts. But the reason why this was a bit thrown off here is because if you look at my intellect score, and that's one component that makes up openness, I was actually scored as exceptionally low. When I actually took the test for the first time and I saw this, I actually laughed for a couple of minutes, because not only am I exceptionally low in this category, but I'm actually in the zeroth percentile, if that's even a word, 0 percentile. So basically what that means is that if you put 100 people in the room, basically all of them will be higher in intellect than me. And intellect doesn't mean intelligence or IQ, but rather it just means your interest in using your logical mind and thinking of different things. So for example, someone who's really interested in debates and thinking about philosophical things and how that applies to different scenarios, and scientists and people that like to use their thinking mind to solve different issues and like to think about different things in a logical way rather than in a more creative way. That would be someone who's very high in intellect. And for that I actually agree, I'm very low in intellect. I prefer to use more of my right side of the brain and think of different, when I use my thinking, it's more for ideas, more for creation, rather than thinking in a logical debate kind of way. And that actually shows a lot in my personality. You can probably see that a lot. And then my second category, the component of openness, is just openness in general. And this is where I got very high. So this is I think is more accurate rather than the overall openness. And this I got a 93rd percentile. So if you have 100 people in the room, I would be more open in general than 93 of them. So that's pretty high up if you think about it. And what this means is that I'm very creative. I like to really surround myself in different ideas and different possibilities. I like beauty, so that's very true. I like art, beautiful crafts. And then it also says that I'd be affected by music and different genres, be completely immersed in movies or books and different thought patterns, being kind of like lost in your thoughts in a very creative way, and then being a bit oblivious to the outside world. This is very true. You might have seen my video where I talked about like extroverted sensing in an INFP video when I was telling the viewers that, there are days ago, like there's some days where I just forget to eat. That's very true. Like I'm very open and like all up on different ideas that I sometimes forget the physical, like here and now and practical things, which is a pro and con, but you can see I'm very, very open in that aspect. Now, the second category is conscientiousness. And this again is that quality of being more into organization, planning, and being very like kind of focused. And with this one, I got exceptionally low. So this one, I also got a 0 percentile. So out of 100 people, I would be like dead last in terms of conscientiousness. So this one, I like literally like laughed for like a while. So basically someone who's like exceptionally low in conscientiousness doesn't consider duty as a virtue or obligation. So there are some people that like are like, really into like hustling and like having to-do lists and like doing all that and like kind of like pushing themselves. That's like not me at all. So I'm like the exact like polar opposite according to this, and I feel like that's true. It says they will not work hard even if continually pushed by other people. So they tend to procrastinate. That's very true. Tend to be late at things. Even if they do commit to something, they will be late, delayed. Yeah, like I was just saying. Even if there's something where you need to like deliver something and you'll just like fail to do it. So they'll always form excuses, or they are not decisive, neat, organized, future-oriented, or reliable. Very true. So you might be thinking like, why is this good, right? Well, it says here, people that are exceptionally low in conscientiousness tend to be absolutely free from guilt, shame, self-disgust, and self-contempt. And they are other people, however, are almost certain to react negatively to the tendency to slack off and avoid responsibility. And now the plus side of this is individuals who are exceptionally low in conscientiousness seem to be completely unconcerned by failures. So I actually think that this is a very good thing because, we're not judgmental at all. A lot of people like beat themselves up. Like they tend to like look at their faults and they're like constantly like, beating themselves up if they don't meet their certain mark. I mean, especially in the hustle culture nowadays. So if you have someone who's like, exceptionally low in this, like me, for example, it can actually be kind of like refreshing because we are very like relaxed. We, don't mind like the mess, and actually hanging around these types of people. I know I'm like justifying this, but I actually think it's very good because it can uplift other people because you can be around someone who doesn't judge you at all. You're free to be yourself, and people who are very low in this are just naturally just very chill. Like they don't beat themselves up. However, you might not want to be roommates with one. And once again, the two components of conscientiousness is industriousness and orderliness. So industriousness is just like more like the hustle kind of mentality, and I have 0. So no surprise there. And then orderliness, which is like just being like clean and like having like schedules and like kind of being like neat about it. And that I have a 0. So no surprise there. So now the next category is extroversion. And for this one, my overall score for extroversion is 31%, which means that I'm like moderately low in extroversion, which I can kind of get because I'm an INFP personality. I'm more introverted for sure. But the reason why it may be a bit skewed here is because, like I mentioned, there's two components to this. So my enthusiasm, just in general, is very high. It's like 95 percentile. But my assertiveness, which also makes up extroversion, is very low. So that's 0 percentile. Now, with this, right, I don't necessarily agree that assertiveness is very like tied in with extroversion, because you'll notice a lot of like very outgoing personality types. Like if you follow the Myers-Briggs, like the ENFP, for example, they're very enthusiastic and very extroverted. They like to have a lot of friends. They spew their energy outwards like all the time. But at the same time, they're not very assertive. So they're not like, they don't necessarily like always like stick out from themselves or like kind of push, or like they're not very like demanding. And I think if they were to take the test, they would have, they would get a personality like very like low in extroversion, which I don't think is very accurate. But in any case, I'll go over this. For enthusiasm, I'm very high in this. So people who are very high in enthusiasm are excitable, they're happy, easy to get along with. They talk pretty rapidly about different things. I think that's kind of true, and they laugh. It says they laugh and giggle quite frequently. And if you've followed me so far, I've been laughing through this this video. They like to party. Yes, that's very true. They cannot keep people at distance. They don't keep things privately. Very positive and optimistic. I think that's very true. They do like stimulation, excitement, activity, and fun. I do think that's true, but not at a rate like an extrovert. I do like, having fun and a bit of stimulus, but not like an extrovert for sure. I do get tired. But I do agree with the enthusiasm part. Now, the assertiveness, this is where I got exceptionally low, and this is 0 percentile. So people who are exceptionally low in assertiveness are not take charge types. So they typically, they don't put their opinions forward rarely. They don't put their opinions forward often, and they don't like to dominate or control social situations. This is especially true if you're high in agreeableness also, which I'll cover in a second. So I think this is true in a sense that I have no need to walk in a room and like control people, but at the same time, what I've learned over the years is how to be assertive. So I do actually like talk for what I want, and I'm pretty stubborn in that sense too. So that's something that this personality type test usually hasn't covered in. But I do agree that this is somewhat true in the sense that I'm not, very impulsive, or, I never act without thinking. And I think that's true in a sense. But I have learned how to, put myself out there, but like push for things. But, if I was just like put in a situation, just like a random situation, my go-to probably wouldn't be to like kind of control everyone. I don't care enough for that. And I do think that this is also a skill set, so you can choose when to be assertive and not assertive. Like I've even written a book on confidence also, where I talk a bit more on how to be assertive. And certainly in like dating situations, I'll take the lead, or if I'm with my friends and I want to go to a certain place, I'll say, hey, we're going to go here. And you see how assertive I was when I'm saying that. But just as a default, I'm probably a bit more chill. I'd like see what's going on, and then like if there's something like I really like, I'm going to push through. So that's assertiveness. Now, the next category is agreeableness. And like I mentioned, it's made up of two categories, which is compassion and politeness. So for agreeableness, I actually got very high. So this is, getting along with other people. So people who are high in agreeableness are very nurturing, they're very kind, they're trusting, and, they tend to get along with people very well. They tend to avoid conflict, and they sometimes the shadow side is like they tend to hide what they think. And someone who, on the flip side, is very low in this, like I mentioned earlier, like stubborn, they're a bit harsh, competitive, and skeptical. And I think this is actually very true because I tend to be a bit more accepting, more chill. I like to get along with people. I usually trust in people in general. And I think when I was younger, especially people who are a bit higher in agreeableness, they tend to be a bit more manipulated by people who are a bit more narcissistic or lower in agreeableness. And I would say definitely when I was younger, this would happen to me where I'd hang around with someone who was, just about like, they just hang out with me because they want something from me. And I was a bit too naive at the time. But what is interesting is when I had learned how to set boundaries, which I've made another talk about, and I learned how to assert myself, and I'm still kind, but I've come from a place of strength over the years. I found that these people just dropped away. So it's interesting how that works. But I think overall, I'm, pretty trusting. I'm pretty like carefree, and I do like to get along with other people. With compassion, I'm moderately high, so I'm about 66th percentile. So I can, empathize with other people, and this is probably why if you're watching this, you can probably relate with my other talks, is because I do understand your struggles and pains, because I'm actively I can kind of sense that. So this is why, I'm able to make this and really speak to you in that sense, because my compassion is pretty high. My polite, and also I would like to also say it's not very high, because if it was very high, I'd probably go along with everything, or like try to solve it. So you've noticed like sometimes on my comments, I'll be like, hey, stop whining, or hey, stop like complaining. And this is probably a sign that I'm not 100% there, like compassion wise, but I'm just like kind of like down the middle where I can kind of empathize, but after a certain while, like, hey, you need to stop complaining and think of solutions. So that's that. And then with politeness, I'm about 94th percentile. So okay, I'm a pretty polite dude. And lastly, the last factor is neuroticism. And for mine, I got it like average. So mine is like 42 percentile. And now I did take this test about, I think 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. I definitely think like my neuroticism is way lower now for sure because I've deepened my meditation practice a lot and I just have a more chill job now. So I think if I were to take it now, I'd get like a much lower result. And by the way, this test I'm taking is a paid thing, so I don't want to pay $40 again and take it again. But people who have average levels of neuroticism, they have a balanced view of happiness and sadness for the past and future. They tend not to worry about different things. They have like a healthy balance. Now, for the components that make up neuroticism, the first one is withdrawal. So I'm pretty low in this. Mine is 36th percentile. So if I was in a room, I'd be lower in withdrawal compared to 63 people out of the 100. So what this means is that we tend not to suffer from anxiety, like being anxious about things that might happen. So people who are like low in this, they don't really feel sad or disappointed too often, and when we do, it's not for long. And then like I mentioned, and also it says, they're not sensitive or worried about social rejection, and they don't feel easily hurt or threatened. And then even when they are hurt or frightened, they tend to recover with relative ease and speed. So I definitely, like I mentioned, I think my neuroticism has gone lower over the years. So I think this would be even lower than it is when I took it. And the next aspect is volatility, which just means your mood just being stable, and mine is average or typical. So mine is like 40th percentile, and this is like right down the middle. So I tend not to fluctuate in my moods, and I think that's kind of true. So I don't go from like being like super disappointed to like angry and like fearful. Like it's kind of stable. And then, like I mentioned, I think it's gotten even lower than that. So now I'm sure I'm more chill. It's more stable in a sense. So the particular test I took was called Understand Myself, and that's by Jordan Peterson. So he made this test, and I took the test, and like I mentioned, when you take this test, be a bit wary about the whole like components part of it, which might skew your overall results. But I found this test like very helpful, and because it has like a full like page long explanation for every single for overall like type, and it goes into detail. So it's a very helpful tool. So yeah, I hope this helps. And if you've taken this test personally, let me know what you got in the comments. So let me know what your combination of each personality like trait is, and I'd be interested to see how my viewers how they stack up compared to me, whether it's like very similar or like way different. And if you want a free test, there's a lot of ones you can just check up on Google, but the one I took was more of a paid one. But you can see if it's accurate, and like let me know again what you got. Hope this helps. Thank you.